Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simon from BEC, and welcome to BEC's Policy Dialogue Series. Today's focus is on countryside conservation. Now, just to give you a bit of background, in 2017, Chief Executive Mrs Carrie Lam announced the setting up of the Countryside Conservation Office to coordinate conservation projects that promote sustainable development of the countryside. Now, the office will also set up a funding scheme providing subsidy to nonprofit organizations to carry out conservation projects and to coordinate minor improvement works in those areas. Some of the priority areas, including Lai Chi Wo, Sha Lo Tung, has been selected, to push for the scheme. Today, we are very happy to have Professor Stephen Tang, head of the Countryside Conservation Office, to be with us today and to tell us a bit more about what's been done, what are the things that we've learned and what will be the next plan. So over to you, Stephen. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Thank you, Simon, for the introduction. And thank you for those who are in front of your computer watching this webinar. In the past few years, we have, since the setup of our office, we have been talking to different people on what we are doing. In fact, we are trying to learn more from all the people we meet. Today, we'll be talking about why there is countryside conservation and our office work approach. And as Simon just said, there are some minor works to be done by the government. And we also have NPOs working with us through countryside conservation funding scheme, what that is, what are happening in the funding scheme. And then last of all, I'll talk something about licensing of guest houses and restaurants in the remote countryside. Then why we talk about countryside conservation? In fact, countryside has been a hot topic globally. Recently, a famous architect and urbanist called Ram Koolhaas has written a book called Countryside, Our Future. And there was a one-year-long exhibition in New York's Guggenheim Museum entitled the same, Countryside, the Future. And in a region, in Japan especially, the term Satoyama has been popular, talking about the countryside to life. And in our country, China, there is a top policy announced in 2017, 2018, and there was an agenda talking about countryside conservation or rural revitalization. In Hong Kong, we have beautiful countryside. And recently, we have a short video produced that aroused a lot of people's interest. Let's take a look. It's just 1 minute long. And just half a year ago, Hong Kong was on the spotlight in terms of countryside conservation. Hong Kong Youth Team has received a Green Award on the Unesco Award on Cultural Heritage, appraising their efforts in cultural heritage in Lai Chi Wo. They have been there for 7 years, spending different efforts through reforming and different activities over there, witnessing the enhancement of biodiversity and more people going there with the cultural heritage conserved. In fact, our countryside is rich in ecology, in architectural setting, and cultural resources. However, due to people leaving these villages for their life, because these villages are too remote, then these villages have been left in ruin. This is an image comparing the former Lai Chi Wo in 1963 and the recent Lai Chi Wo in 2017. The terrace farming areas have been overtaken by invasive planting. The effect is the biodiversity is degrading as well. So in 2017's policy address, as Simon just mentioned, the CE has announced the setting up of our office, Countryside Conservation Office, and has earmarked 1 billion for us to take up the efforts to coordinate the current and revitalization efforts of the community. As a priority, we also work with focus on Lai Chi Wo and Sha Lo Tung for countryside revitalization as well as ecological conservation in these two areas, and hope that we can earn some experience and radiate to other areas. This is Lai Chi Wo. Is at the northeastern corner of Hong Kong. It's a very old village, 400 years old. And because of its remoteness, it's quite left intact. In our office has 4 approaches on our work. One is to coordinate and collaborate on different efforts by the government itself and by the community. The second approach is to improve and facilitate. Either we do some improvement work ourselves to the villages, or we facilitate other people in working on it. The third is research and innovate, because we don't know this new topic in Hong Kong. We have to do some research on site and with the academics and try to innovate some new solutions that are not yet there. And with all these, we try to promote to the community of what we're doing and hope that we can cultivate a culture in the community on countryside conservation. We work with different stakeholders, including the academics, and also we take advice from the advisory committee on countryside conservation chaired by the Secretary for Environment, and a lot of people who are from different sectors. We also work with different government departments. So far, these are the departments we are working with, and there are many more. In fact, without coordination, different people or different departments are working on their own agenda. And only with our office, we know what we are heading towards. We try to pull together these different departments on what they are doing and try to reach some consent among these departments, because there are some policies that are not facilitating countryside conservation at the moment. And of course, we're working with villagers who are the key stakeholders. Without their cooperation, we can't work in their area. And so far, we are working very well with these villages on different efforts. And within the government, we are given some money to do minor improvement works. With $1 billion, half goes to the minor improvement works and half goes to a funding scheme for the community. Our improvement works include toilets, improvement, footpath, water supplies, sewage, and drainage system, etc. For example, we improve the external assets of these villages, because without these external outlets, they can't reach out and people can't reach them. And you can see from this map, for example, Lai Chi Wo can be accessed to water from Sha Lo Tung Pier, but it's now a closed area, and the people going from Sha Lo Tung to Lai Chi Wo requires a closed area permit. And normally people go from Ma Liu Shui near Sha Tin, but it takes 90 minutes. It's quite a far journey going there. When you travel such a long journey, you're expecting a good access point. So we are doing some public pier improvement over there. Hope that more vessels of different sizes can go there, park there, and take people there. And within the area of the villages, we have to improve the local access. For example, in the upper right-hand corner, you can see people carry their daily necessities up to the villages by carrying on the shoulder, walking up steps. But now we have just finished a footpath with a ramp that takes people from Lai Chi Wo up to another village called Mui Chi Lam. It's a 1 kilometer long journey, and with that ramp, belt trucks can ride on it and take heavy stuff up the hill. That is very important to revitalize a village, because you can't expect people carrying daily necessities up the hill. Even walking takes you half an hour, but with heavy stuff, it takes much longer. And we hope that apart from the basic needs of riding a belt truck on the footpath, we try to use natural material for footpath improvement, just like the image on photo. The damaged footpath is being repaired by hand and by natural materials, taking natural stone from surrounding. And at the right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner, you can see that the Construction Industry Council's volunteers are also helping us to repair our retaining wall using their hands instead of tools or using concrete. We hate to see concrete everywhere, especially in the countryside. We hope to retain the natural outlook the ambience, natural ambience of these areas. And another improvement we are working on are the toilets. In fact, toilet is the first landmark you'll find in the countryside, right? By your smell. Now we try to improve these public toilets, not only through mobile toilets like the one that we are temporarily providing the public with. We are trying to provide eco-friendly, family-friendly, MIC constructed, and smart toilets in Lai Chi Wo and Sha Lo Tung, these two pilot areas. And hopefully by next year's May, we'll have the Lai Chi Wo new toilet in use. And we hope that these are family friendly because it's 2 meter by 2.5 meter inside. And you can take the family when you go there with your kids. You can go to toilet with the kids. And on the roof, it's not just a solid roof, it's AIPV. You can see the clouds passing by you, above you when it's a fine day. And at the same time, that roof is generating electricity. And there's some sensor when there's smell of ammonia by the urine, then it will trigger on the fan to take away the smell. And there are some sensor on the occupancy, light sensor, daylight sensor. If it's bright enough, no light is turned on, you can save some energy in the lighting, etc., etc. And for the villagers who are living at the old houses, one biggest challenge is that there is no toilet. Or if there is toilet, it goes to the septic tank that is not working that well. Then we are trying now to improve the sewage system, trying to provide some public sewage system, collecting sewer to a central point, and we may introduce sewage treatment and etc. Try to bring in environmentally friendly sewage system to the old villagers. Similarly, drainage. Drainage is a big problem, especially during rainy days. Not only that the village may be flooded, but the farmland may also be flooded. Just imagine if you go a long way, spending your weekends farming, hoping that there will be some crops that you can harvest. But one day when you go there, it's flooded, and even your equipment is damaged by the flooding, then it will discourage people going there. How can we talk about refarming? So we are trying to study how to improve the drainage to avoid flooding. And in order that we can understand the topography of the area, we have taken some effort to use UAV to survey the site, the village, so that we don't need to go there every time when we try to think or plan with something at the place, because we now have a 3D model that we can work on. We can communicate with different stakeholders using that 3D model, electronic model through our computer. Now we're expanding this survey to cover the surrounding areas, the surrounding villages, to explore ways of connecting Lai Chi Wo village with the other villages to form a syndicate effect. So much about the work by our office, the improvement works by our office. As I say, we rely a lot on our working partners. There's a community. Through funding them, funding the non-profit organizations in different efforts. We are allocated 500 million to work on, to support some management agreement for nature conservation, building heritage, cultural revitalization, and research activities. I just show you some examples of that. The eligible sites for this funding scheme, there are two categories. One is the priority areas for enhanced conservation in the private land in country park enclaves or country parks. The second is those remote villages. How to define remote? We just say somewhere at least 500 meters away from public transport. So far, that is our definition. And rental area is excluded from our office ambit because there's another office called Sustainable Rental Office taking care of those countryside conservation. Since the launch of this funding scheme in 2019, in less than 2 years, it's about 1.5 years, we have approved 17 projects costing over 100 million. And I hope that next month we'll have another 10 projects, about 40 million to be approved. And these projects are shown in the dots on this map. I'll go in a bit detail on some of the projects. For example, in Saiwan, in Sai Kung, there is a management agreement called Rehabilitation Project for Saiwan area. It's about appreciation on ecology, culture, and natural environment. There is also some farming activities, apart from educational activities there by the Sai Kung District Community Center. Another is the Eco Fish Pond Management Agreement by the Hong Kong Bird Watching Society at Deep Bay wetland outside the Ramsar site. When you witness this activity, it's very interesting. You see on the right, the fisherman is harvesting, taking away the fish to the fish market, and then they drain off the water of that fish pond, but they leave some fish there for the birds, to feed the birds. The birds know that they can have some food after these fishermen were away. So they know that by some time they return here, they will have some fish. And then that becomes a habit for the birds to come every year. Another project is towards sustainable and inclusive conservation and revitalization in Hing Chun Yap villages, Kok Po and Fung Hang. It's a research by the Faculty of Architecture, University of Hong Kong. They'll research on all these villages to see what are the current situation in terms of different parameters, and then they will propose what we can do to improve the village in terms of revitalization and nature conservation. Another project is called Project Plum Grove, revitalizing Lai Chi Lam with experimental restorations by the CUHK. It's also their Faculty of Architecture. They try to regenerate a place by reconnecting people via a collaborative process. Another interesting project is a participatory action research at Lai Chi Wo, the same village as the previous project. They are organizing different volunteers to dig out some artifacts from the village. And on the photo, you see those not really historic relics, but those left behind stuff by the villagers many years ago. And through looking at these utensils and interviewing some old villagers, you can reconstruct the diary of those villages in the old days, during festival, during every day. What do they eat? What do they do for leisure, etc. And another project is a Catholic churches and villages cultural walks in cycle by the Diocesan Working Committee following Lai Way. They try to explore resources to provide holistic cultivation of body, mind, and spirit. In fact, in Sai Kung, there are many Catholic churches that can be linked together. And there are some stories behind these churches. And it would be a very interesting walk if these churches are linked up and repaired well for use. Another is for non-indigenous village. This is at Phu Thê Ao, cultural revitalization at Phu Thê Ao by the Sekwo Lutheran Community Development Project team. They try to revitalize the unique culture and life of the non-indigenous village. Those villagers were the workers for the Hong Kong Canton Railway. So how did they live? What culture did they maintain at the time? It's a very interesting story. And as we just said, we have a priority area at Lai Chi Wo, and there are in fact several CCFS schemes now at Lai Chi Wo. So far, the experience has been very encouraging, and the different teams are radiating their experience to nearby villages like Mui Chi Lam and Kap Tong for refarming and other activities like clamping and digging artifacts. So much about our work through government and the funding scheme. There is a common problem that we encounter. A lot of people complain that you take a long time traveling there, but you can't stay overnight because there's no licensed guest house. And you travel a long way, you can't find licensed restaurants. But when we travel overseas, like in the UK, B&B is very popular. Singapore, Japan as well, in Taiwan. We take a lot of photos and post in the Instagram sharing our good experience going to these places. But why not in Hong Kong? Why don't we have similar in Hong Kong? In order for us to investigate further, to understand more why this is so, we take a closer look at Lai Chi Wo. The blue hashed houses are the houses under the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation's Hakka Life Experience Village. Hong Kong Countryside Foundation has secured about 50 million from Hong Kong Jockey Club to renovate 14 houses into guest house. And they intend to apply for a guest house license under the current licensing system. But so far, after near to 4 years, I think, they still haven't successfully got a license. Why? The brown hashed ones are the existing restaurants with our license. They are running business, but why not get a license? The green one is a potential licensed catering premise that we are helping them to get a license through the system. So we get a closer look. A few months ago, I walked CE and Secretary for Environment to Lai Chi Wo to look closer to one of the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation's renovated houses, intending to get a license. But what are the barriers for getting a license? First of all, the current licensing system for guest house is based on a city environment, based on a modern building standard. But for village houses, especially those old village houses that are almost 400 years old, the lighting and ventilation cannot comply with today's standard, because in the old days, Hakka village houses are built to defend them from robbers, invaders. So they intentionally have small windows. So how can they achieve the lighting and ventilation standard of today? And on the right side, there's a court loft. How can this wood court loft satisfy today's standard in structural safety, fire resistance, and fire safety? And how can that staircase walking up to the court loft fulfill today's staircase standard? And further, for those old village houses, there are not very good land records. And for the lot boundary, government's record is a bit arbitrary. And the villagers' own record are not that complete. From their ancestors, how can you expect the land record as complete? So all these together make the verification of status very difficult. Compliance to today's health and safety standard very difficult. But we can't say, oh, we don't have to take care of these. So what is the compromise that we can make to make it safe, ensuring healthy standard, and at the same time, easy for obtaining a license. So just a few months ago, the CEA has agreed and announced a policy address asking my office to work with different bureaus and departments to jointly develop a set of licensing requirements and procedural guidelines designed especially for guest houses and catering businesses in the countryside areas, making reference to the specific nature and restrictions of these rural settings. Hopefully, will make life easier in the countryside. Now we have a short video to share with you. Oh, never mind.
香港偏遠鄉郊有好山好水，例如呢個客家圍村蘊藏數百年歷史，屋舍儼然，但係曾幾何時幾乎荒廢。2018年政府成立鄉郊保育辦公室，簡稱鄉郊辦，支持復育偏遠鄉郊，桃花源可望重現。
我喺 CCO 咧就係負責一啲鄉郊設施改善嘅前期規劃工作啦。咁你有冇去邊度行？
去咗荔枝窩度行啦，因為嗰度有個太平清醮嘅活動啦。
我哋 CCO 咧除咗會資助一啲保育項目之外啦，我哋都會幫手去改善一啲鄉郊設施嘅。洗手間我哋會睇下佢有冇改善嘅空間啦。喺荔枝窩咧做咗2個新嘅太陽能嘅流動廁所啦。你有冇去試用過？
我覺得呢個廁所嘅設計都幾新穎，因為一嚟佢綠色啦，尤其喺鄉郊地方咧，咁你意想不到可能有個太陽能一個廁所喺度，方便啲嘅。雖然細少少，但係佢都好樂意用嘅。
咁同埋去到鄉郊啲地方咧，佢啲步道咧，我哋都會睇下佢嘅狀況嘅。咁我哋都會同其他部門咧去傾下點樣去即係修復翻呢啲爛咗嘅步道，咁就令到大家去到鄉郊地方嗰陣咧，就可以更加樂在其中啦。
最深刻嘅經歷就係一次嘅清河嘅活動啦，由佢哋細個嘅時候已經開始做㗎啦，係人手咁樣將一啲河上面嘅沉積物就搬翻上嚟，咁就疏導翻個河水，等佢唔好咁容易氾濫啦。村民咧佢哋就非常之感謝我哋啦，咁我哋都打成一片咁樣啦，感覺上佢哋當咗我哋一份子咁樣咯。
喺 CCO 裏邊咧，我就有機會接觸到嚟自唔同其他部門嘅同事啦，即係擺一個臨時洗手間，聽落去好似好易嘅。附近啲環境有啲咩考慮啦？咁我哋會有漁護署嘅同事，呢個鄉郊位置夠唔夠穩陣咧？咁我哋又有工程嘅同事，另外民政處嘅同事啦，亦同村裏邊嘅村長去傾翻呢方面啦。呢個經驗都對我嚟講，我覺得係好特別嘅。
為咗集思廣益，去年中政府成立鄉郊保育諮詢委員會，又為咗同行復育。去年底，鄉郊辦推出鄉郊保育資助計劃，嚟資助非牟利機構等等推行自然保育同埋活化建築等嘅項目。為咗同心協力，鄉郊辦同村民、社會各界同政府部門推動三方嘅努力。好一啲嘅鄉郊已經設立故事館，訴說村中桃花源嘅古今故事，歡迎尋訪，城鄉共融。
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you for your presentation and the video and the sharing. I have to say, in this latter part of your presentation, it gave me an impression that I'm planning for my vacation. That's the part that I've missed so much in the last 18 months. But I mean, it's really impressive. You know, just tell me how many people you have in your office.
Well, our establishment is 19 people,
okay,
including a clerk.
Okay.
So just a very small office.
Okay.
And we have security staff from different departments like architectural department, CEDD, and AFCD.
Okay. And because you also mentioned you already have 17 projects, and maybe next month you're going to announce another 10. So that's a lot of projects with a limited number of people in your office. So can you just tell me a little bit about what's next with your office? I mean, you talk about the licensing. I think that's a big task and a very important task. In terms of projects, do you have any expectation, like after the next round, how many more you would like to see? Or is it more depends on the opportunities that comes your way?
Well, in terms of licensing, we are working with different departments like planning department, lands department, home affairs department, fire service department, FDXD, etc., to sort out what is the current system and what we can break through to reduce some unnecessary or too harsh requirements. And we are tasked to have our first stage outcome mid next year.
Okay.
So in a coming year, 12 months, we will be working very focused on that issue. And at the same time, for the CCFS scheme, hopefully next month we'll have 10 more approved projects. So in addition to the 17 projects already approved, we have quite a lot for so few staff. So just before this meeting, I just talked to Mike that we are trying to trim down unnecessary procedures in the funding scheme, from the application side and from the running of the project side, so that both the organizations running the projects can reduce a bit of resources in the manpower and the time. And that also happened to our office. We can have swifter response with less people. We are working towards that.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Now, we have Mike Cuban here. Thank you, Mike, for joining. I mean, Mike is a good friend of mine. I don't think I need to introduce you in your previous capacity with the Airport Authority Hong Kong, and before that with Civic Exchange. Rather, I would like to highlight your lifelong passion for the natural environment. And I mean, you've been involved in the biodiversity conservation in Hong Kong since, when? I mean, 1990, probably. And you are wearing different hats, a Birdwatching Society, the Hong Kong, Countryside Foundation. And so, I mean, it's great to have you here, Mike. Before I ask you to share your thoughts, based on, Stephen's presentation, as well as countryside conservation in general, I would like to ask and remind the audience, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to share with the speakers or the other, participants, please use the Q&A box and type in your remarks. So with that, Mike, over to you. Just share your thoughts about the subject, and and based on Stephen's sharing, what do you think we can do more in Hong Kong?
Sure. Well, thank you, Simon, and for giving me the opportunity to come and join the conversation, to Stephen for a terrific presentation based on terrific work. As a director of the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation and of the Hong Kong Birdwatching Society, which are two projects funded now under your fund, I have to say how important it is that this office is set up with a specific goal of making it easier to match organizations who want to do good work with the resources to do it, and also the support to address some of the bureaucratic challenges, which can be very stifling to people who are trying to do good work. So, I think particularly in relation to Lai Chi Wo, I think people don't think about licensing as a sexy or an exciting issue, but it's so critical. If, as an NGO, you have to go from one office to another, it takes a lot of time. You never know if you find the right person. But because this office, your office has been set up, seconding people in, everybody from each department sitting effectively around one big table to resolve issues. This is an enormously important framework to simplify the process by bringing all the heads together in one place, along with a clear message from the chief executive, help people fix their problems. Don't make it harder, make it easier. And I think that that's an enormously important contribution to facilitating conservation work, whether it's cultural conservation or ecological conservation. So my first comment is really just to offer my appreciation for the work that you're doing, and the reflection of your effectiveness is how many projects is already going and how many more is coming in the next year. Because one of the other challenges in the past has been to seek approval for funding from a range of funders, private sector, public sector. But again, as we were talking before, you were talking about your approach is not so much submission of projects to a committee, but working with a project officer to help applicants to figure out how to frame their projects in a way so that they can get funding in the most effective manner. And I think what I hope is this is very encouraging for people to hear who are interested in supporting nature conservation, but perhaps have been deterred in the past by some of the challenges around fundings and approvals.
Yeah.
So I think this concept is fantastic. And I think immediately we can see the benefit from how many dots you have on the map for how much support you're doing. And actually, like Simon, what it reminds me is how fantastic our countryside heritage is, both in ecological terms and in cultural terms. I'm born and raised in Hong Kong. I've walked past the Catholic churches in Dalong Wan since I was 5 years old. I go bird watching every weekend. I've traveled literally from Lai Chi Wo to Sha Lo, top to bottom of Hong Kong. And it's fantastic to see active investment in that part of our heritage, which so that more people can enjoy it in a sustainable way. And I think this comes to my second kind of large comment, which is the challenge of success is when you know, Hong Kong people more and more are visiting country parks. They appreciate the environment, but we have 7 million people in a small area. And the risk is success, is the carrying capacity. How many people can really visit Lai Chi Wo? How much toilet flushing capacity is there? How many ferries can you have? And I think that the fact that this issue of carrying capacity, how do you manage the development so that it fits the context of a small place, so that the people who come don't destroy it by coming? You know, if there's 1,000 people there every 2 hours, it's another urban experience. It needs to be an experience which is enjoyed as a rural experience. So the fact that you're thinking about how to present this in a way so that it remains something that can be enjoyed by more people, but not too many people, I think is a critical component for the scheme. And I think the other question, again, going back to the licensing, is that in these rural areas, of course, in Hong Kong, land is valuable. And I think it must be and I think maybe I'll frame my comment as a question. How do you strike the balance between encouraging the revitalization of villages without encouraging the development of simply more small houses, which we know cover many villages in the NT, and it's these more remote locations which are the last ones to really be available now for small house development. But small house development, honestly speaking, doesn't reflect the cultural heritage. It's a square block of a fixed size that has a very different cultural setting from the traditional Hakka houses, which is so much a part of the historical cultural heritage. So can you give us some insight on how we strike that balance between revitalization for culture and nature while managing the expectation on economic development for profit?
Thank you. I answer Mike's 2 questions. The last question first. From the very start, we talked to village representatives that we are not for development. We have to conserve the countryside. We have to conserve as well the ambience. So that is not our priority, especially that's not something that we hope that it will happen. So suggestions like building a road, forget about it.
Yeah.
No way. Since our first year, there were some questions on this, asking whether that is possible. We say no. Second year, nobody asked, and now nobody asked this question again.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that expectation is well managed, and they know what we are for. If you talk about development, don't talk to us. Check with Development Bureau, and Development Bureau has a very clear direction on how to manage the village zoned areas. So that is also my ambit. I don't comment further on that, but don't talk to me on development, first thing. Second is about the carrying capacity of the small villages. If we promote Lai Chi Wo so well, would it be attracting too many people going there, taking 1,000 people per hour there? We do have a concern from the very start. So we take reference on how Japan managed, for example, Laoshima, Lai, they have some scheme, some program to promote Laoshima as an for a triennial art festival there. But when you go there, it's well managed because they have scheduled their ferries, taking a fixed quantum of people going there, and well managed the facilities on that small island. So in Hong Kong, we think about that. We can do the same. We can manage the ferry schedule. But further, we think that there are some private vessels that we can't really manage. They can go there by their own vessel, their charter vessel. So instead of just copying from Japan, we're exploring other approaches. My colleagues have been working together with Make a Difference by Ada Wong and Paul Chan. They are looking at how to develop Hong Kong's local tourism. The approach is similar to what Taiwan is having. Instead of encouraging people flocking to a place because it's too popular, and then people just consume the place by putting money, buy some food, buy some souvenir, and then go away without really understanding the place. So instead of this, we are trying to promote some deeper local tourism by encouraging people to understand the place further, deeper with the villagers, the indigenous villagers. We are trying to encourage these small and deeper cultural tourism to the villages that we are promoting. And we are testing that mode recently, and results yet to be known. Our colleagues have been spending half a year working on different workshops, taking reference to the Taiwan model. And we are learning from that experience. So we hope that there's a hypothesis for Hong Kong. We hope that people not only go to Lai Chi Wo, they can go to many other villages. In fact, there are many, many small villages in Hong Kong. What we just introduce to people are just several that are more popular and more accessible. And at the same time, we are trying to improve the licensing system for the guest houses and the restaurants. Hope that everywhere, very remote, you can have these facilities to support people staying at their pace, slowly learn the place, and you love the place, and you work together with the villagers, and then after this visit, you go there again sometime, or every quarter, or every year. Then these people will be dispersed into different areas of Hong Kong. And the big picture is Hong Kong is really urban-rural in a symbiosis situation that we hope we can achieve. So that is a big picture we have. In terms of dream, I hope this dream will come true. And so the first exercise that we are very eager to succeed is the licensing system, making the villagers having a proper licensed restaurant and guest house very easily. Or maybe we may think of subsidy by the government, like bringing the safety standard of those old tenement houses into better safety in terms of electricity, etc. That is the next step if the incentive through our new licensing system is not good enough. So put that away first. We focus on removing those red tapes and removing those unnecessary safety and health standards for the moment. And in fact, those small houses, the rest is really small. We are not looking at a very big group of houses. Once there's a fire, it will spread all around. We are just talking isolated houses. So we can really assess the risk standard and what is the mitigation measures. So we hope that this will pave our way towards a better picture in terms of spreading people to different places, not overloading a certain village.
Thank you. I have a follow-up comment. I think that Hong Kong, because it is mountainous, we're a small place, but there's 1,000 corners. You know, because you can be just 500 meters from the city over the hill in a very rural setting. So whether it's in Sha Lo Tung, Lai Chi Wo, Kop Tong, they're all very close together, but you can't see one from another. You have to make an effort to go to each one. So the idea that you can be spread out is, I buy this concept. And I think that at the moment we're in a stage of exploration, figuring out how to do it with some key locations first, and then spread the idea wider. Now, I want to ask a different question about the CCO is in relation to the research and funding. And I'm thinking more of the BBC members, so the BEC members, many of who are companies and corporations. And I'm thinking about some of are there ways to link the commercial interest to the natural environment? So I'm thinking about concepts such as a nature conservation trust, where developers maybe can surrender land of high ecological value and transfer their development right to a less sensitive location is one concept that I've worked on for a number of years. And another one emerging more recently is the idea of nature-based carbon sequestration. So it's becoming a concept around the world where people are buying rural areas and encouraging ecological restoration so that the soil and the forest or the wetland is capturing carbon, and they can claim credit for capturing the carbon by managing the environment. Now, this is very different in scope from the projects you've been talking about so far. So I just want to ask in terms of the research element of your office, is there capacity to have some discussion about these issues that are related to nature conservation, but of a slightly different nature?
We welcome that.
Right.
In terms of research, anything that benefits countryside conservation, we welcome that. And in fact, we have quite a number of research projects ongoing now. We don't set a limit. We don't set a boundary of what category of research that needs to be. So the concept that you brought out is I think we can, of course, consider.
Right.
And there is another source of funding called ECF.
Yep.
I think they also sponsor this kind of researches.
Okay.
We'll figure out if they already have an ambit to cover certain research, then our office will step back.
Yeah.
So in order to avoid duplication of resources, I think that is in general the government's policies that, but we can explore on that.
Well, thank you. I think what's attractive to me about the Countryside Conservation Office is this one table framework where you bring representatives from different departments together to discuss an issue with each other, with the view to finding a practical solution.
Yeah.
And I think that it's true in many companies and in many governments that each department is very difficult for an officer to operate outside his formal boundary. But you have been given permission, all of you, to think around issues beyond your boundaries. And I think that's a very exciting opportunity to discuss some of these new ideas, even if it's not necessarily a funded proposal, but just to begin a conversation.
Yeah.
Again, that's something that is potentially very, very interesting.
Yes. In fact, whether that falls within our ambit in terms of funding scheme, we welcome different dialogues.
Yeah.
There is totally no boundary on the dialogue. And in fact, there is another topic that we explore in terms of business related is on the smart technology. When we talk about smart city, we also talk about smart village. Instead of just keeping the villages or conserving the village, we try to explore solutions for a sustainable village through smart technology and smart behavior of the people going there. So this is something that I really hope that BEC can shed us some light.
Okay. One thought that comes to mind in that aspect, of course, is Wi-Fi access. I mean, it's a very urban idea, but if you can get Wi-Fi access in the village, of course, you can do many things. And you encourage many people who will not go to the countryside to live in the countryside if they can do their stock trading and live their life through their laptop computer. I also think that particularly given this idea of spreading people to many villages, if you can almost create a mega quota system, so in each village we can set out a framework to know how many people or how many tour groups is going to this village and this village and this village. We can stop the Instagram effect where you have 2 million people queuing up for the same photo, one after another, all day in the same location.
For the Wi-Fi access, the toilet project that we are working on, we have incorporated Wi-Fi accessibility. But unfortunately, we have checked with the contractor who has taken up government's contract for laying fiber optics. Lai Chi Wo is at a later stage, but that is one of the target villages to be provided with fiber optics.
Right.
And we will have Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi,
Right.
Generated from our toilet building at first. So, well, we also have a dream that people can have choice to live in the countryside, in the remote countryside, and live as normal through having Wi-Fi. And in fact, there are some, maybe you also know, at Lai Chi Wo, there are some artists living in, curate some artwork there. And I have a friend, in fact, a relative living in Lai Chi Wo, and she is half city person and half at Lai Chi Wo. And during her stay in Lai Chi Wo, she just meditate, doing calligraphy, and doing reforming. So it's a kind of life that I'm jealous of. And if there's a choice, that will be best. And Hong Kong is full of choices. And we hope that living in countryside is really a choice. So we hope that by improving the infrastructure, improving sewage, drainage, public facilities, Hong Kong is not just condensed with the city area, which is just 25% of the Hong Kong's area.
Yeah.
There are many other areas that we can stay and live in.
Great, well, thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, let's switch our focus to some of the questions from the
Yeah.
audience, okay? Now, Mike, you talk about carbon capture. Actually, we've got a question from an audience talking about reducing carbon footprint of the food that we consume. So the question is for you, Stephen. Any thoughts on encouraging and incentivizing local farm produce in the sites that you're working on? Do you have any examples doing just that, or do you think it's a feasible idea moving forward?
Consuming local farm products.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Well, in fact, Hong Kong they just got a Unesco Award. They are doing the same thing. They are having the local produce processed in a place nearby because they can easily get a license for a food factory in Sha Lo Tung, but not easy at Lai Chi Wo at the moment. And I hope that later on they can have a food factory at Lai Chi Wo. And those local produce are on market in Yatta
Okay.
department store.
Okay.
And in fact, they have other plans as well. From farm to table, they were very attractive. As a tourist, I like to enjoy fresh food from the farm.
Sure.
And in fact, they have a plan of inviting those Michelin chefs to turn the local produce into really delicious food that can be started eventually. So there are different good ideas going on.
Okay.
We hope that they will be realized very soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Now, you mentioned a few times the UNESCO Award, and actually, I have Winnie Law in the audience, and of course, she is in charge of the project. Now, she asked two questions. One is, how will the different projects or proposal at the same location or village be coordinated such that together they can build a common and integrated sustainable future for these locations? So because you're talking about, growing number of projects, how can you make sure that there will be integration, especially in the same location? So that's the first question. The second one is, these new projects will bring about both positive and negative impact to the villages. How will these impact be measured and monitored? Do you have a system right now or mechanism? If not, are there opportunities to, say, work with the academia or work with the business sector to come up with a system that would help? I think two very good questions.
Thank you, Winnie. In fact, I have been talking about Winnie's award-winning project for quite a number of times.
Yes.
And in fact, in front of the CE. First question, for synergy. In fact, we do hope that there is synergy, but different projects coming in as CCFS, we are rather passive. We don't know what is there out in the market or out in the community that we can coordinate. Only when those projects come to us, at the moment we have a system called coordination meeting among different proposers, different organizations. And for example, in Mui Chi Lam and Kap Tong, there are 3 organizations. Then we had a coordination meeting and let each other know what the other people are doing. And we proactively say, this organization, you concentrate more on this and take away some of the work that are being carried out by other NPO. Although that is something that we have to work together. Not instruction from CCO. We just perform as a coordinator. And of course, if there are some gaps that we see that some activities are here. If there were some other activities that would be better, then we just reach out to those people that we know that will fill the gap and we proactively do so. Hope that this will form a synergy. But as everybody knows, we are just 3 years old, still an infant. We need a lot of wisdom from the community. We need more advice. If there are any good suggestions or good references, we really like to know. The second question is, there are some positive and negative impacts on the villages and how to measure and how to monitor. We have a system requiring different organizations to report to us on the inception report on the progress, and instead of a pile of documents, we like to talk with different people to understand what is done. And we are structuring our KPI, Key Performance Index, for different organizations in the future. We're still debating among our office on what to be included as a KPI instead of a long list of the sustainable development objectives. We hope that we can highlight several easily understood KPI for every NPO. When they submit their application, they will tell us what are the KPIs so that we can understand whether they are achieving that, so that we can monitor and coordinate and help.
Okay, Mike, do you want to?
Yes, indeed. I've been very inspired by hearing how much is going on. And I know that there are other things going on which are outside your remit. For example, Yi-O and Lantau is also exploring the development of food and it's being consumed in the Heritage Hotel and it's being sold in Tai O Village nearby. To go to the other side of Hong Kong, Pak Sa O Village, the residents there invest a great deal in keeping their village site, using local materials to keep the integrity of their village. And it just seems to me that this is one of those ideas that when people understand how much is going on, both through your office and through other sources, I think they will be amazed at how, they will be amazed, frankly speaking. And I just wonder, is it time to have some kind of conference or some kind of public event to bring together people, A, to do the coordination that Winnie is talking about, but also to help people realize the size of the community that's thinking about these issues? And I just wonder if now or within the next year may be a good time, as you have some successes from your own work, but also can provide a platform for successes for other styles, because they range from one guy managing a fish pond in Nam Chong to grow lotuses, to the Pak Sha O model, to your model, to other approaches, people interested in the ancient pathways and so on, where I just wonder if actually profiling this will give people an opportunity, A, to see what diversity there is in this area in Hong Kong, and to create some collaboration which can lead to building a community that does have a stronger sense of what they might be doing together.
That is a very good suggestion. In fact, for the first year of our office setup, I proposed having a kind of seminar or conference or summit. But within my office, there were some debates saying, well, we are rather ignorant in many aspects. Let's gather more wisdom, gather more experience, and we can tell people what are happening, what challenges we meet, and what are solutions we think of, and we bring in people that we know have certain kind of solution. So it's a matter of timing. That's in our mind. Either within a year or around that time, we are hoping to have a conference to gather different wisdom. And in fact, before the COVID, we intend to bring people from different overseas, mainland, different places have their own philosophy, their path, success or failure that we can take reference to. So that is in our mind. We are looking for the appropriate time.
Great, that's encouraging to hear, because I think that there are some fantastic stories to tell and some great partnerships to develop, and they're very diverse in nature. I realize the time is short, but I just think of another one where the Hong Kong Golf Club is working very hard to protect a small area of marshy ground with some trees, which are unique to only 2 or 3 locations in the world. And who can imagine that the golf course is protecting critical biodiversity? But some of these examples, once people know, I think the general appreciation for Hong Kong's countryside and our cultural heritage can be raised to a higher level. And I think, don't worry if you don't know all the answers. The whole point of a conference is to bring together many experts.
Sure.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Mike and Stephen. Of course, I think, Mike, you're right, we're running out of time, but at the last point that you mentioned about a conference or an event that can bring together wisdoms, experience, expertise, so that we can move forward together. I think that's like a point of convergence, a very good one for us to end this conversation. I think we have a very, a wonderful conversation. I mean, we touches on a number of critical issues for CCO to move forward with some new ideas, food for thoughts. I mean, for BC, from the business angle, we would like to see, the interest from the business sector being raised or enhanced in this particular issue. But of course, we know without development or opportunities to, talk about development, it will be a challenge. But still, I'm sure the business sector will have a role to play, whether it's through your licensing system, catering businesses, guest houses. Maybe in the future, there'll be more to come. So with that, thank you once again for coming, Stephen and Mike. And thank you for all the audience for tuning in and staying to the very end. And thank you so much, and have a nice day. Thank you.